We might thus counterpose a specialization of being to the narrativization of being undertaken by sociologists and philosophers of modernity and postmodernity. That is to say, we need to render being intelligible in terms of the localization of routines, habits, and techniques within specific domains of action and value. Libraries and studies, bedrooms and bathhouses, courtrooms and schoolrooms, consulting rooms, and museums, galleries, markets, and department stores. The 5 volumes of The History of Private Life, compiled under the general editorship of Philip Arias and George Dubby, provide a wealth of examples of the way in which novel human capacities, such as styles of writing or sexuality, depend upon and give rise to particular forms of spatial organization of the human habitat. Vane, 1987, Duty, 1988, Cartier, 1989, Perrot, 1990, Prost and Vincent, 1991. However, there is nothing privileged about what has come to be termed private life, for the emplacement of regimes of subjectification. It is in the factory as much as the kitchen, in the military as much as the study, in the office as much as the bedroom, that the modern subject has been required to identify his or her subjectivity. To the apparent linearity, unidirectionality, and irreversibility of time, we can counterpose the multiplicity of places, planes, and practices. And in each of these spaces, repertories of conduct are activated that are not bounded by the enclosure formed by the human skin or carried in a stable form in the interior of an individual. They are rather webs of tension across a space that accord human beings' capacities and powers to the extent that they catch them up in hybrid assemblages of knowledges, instrument vocabularies, systems of judgment, and technical artifacts. To this extent, a genealogy of subjectification needs to think human beings being as a kind of machination, a hybrid of flesh, knowledge, passion, and technique. Araway, 1991. One of the characteristics of our current regime of the self is a way of reflecting upon and acting upon all these diverse domains, practices, and assemblages in terms of a unified personality to be revealed, discovered, and worked on in each. Machination of the self that today forms the horizon of the thinkable. But this machination needs to be recognized as a specific regime of subjectification of recent origin. And the aim of a genealogy of subjectification is to unsettle it sufficiently to reveal the fragility of the lines that have made it up and hold it in place. Subjectification today, a new configuration. Those who stress the postmodern features of our present suggest that subjectivity today has characteristic and novel features such as uncertainty, reflexivity, self-scrutiny, fragmentation, and diversity. From the perspective I have outlined in this chapter, the questions about ourselves and our presence should be posed rather differently. We are witnessing a transformation in the ontology through which we think ourselves, a mutation in the techniques through which we conduct ourselves, a reconfiguration of the relations of authority by means of which we divide ourselves and identify ourselves as certain kinds of person, exercise certain kinds of concern in relation to ourselves, and govern ourselves as human beings of a particular sort. Thus the diversity of authorities of the self in our present, the popularization of moral codes, the apparent attenuation of the links between political government and the regulation of conduct, the heterogeneity of forms of life, the valorization of choices and freedom in the shaping of a style of life, the simultaneous celebration of individuality, and proliferation of techniques of group identification and segmentation. Thus all this signify that new modes of subjectification have appeared today. My aim in this chapter has been to suggest that investigations of such questions should concern themselves with the intersection of practices for the government of others and practices for the government to the self. This is not the place to undertake a detailed exploration of them. However, let me make a few points in conclusion. Autonomy, freedom, choice, authenticity, enterprise, lifestyle. This new ethical vocabulary should neither be derided with an aristocratic disdain, nor interpreted as the sign of cultural malice or the death of God, but be understood in terms of new rationalities of government and new technologies of the conduct. Rose 1992, Reef 1966, 1987. In a whole variety of different locales, not just in sexuality, diet, or the promotion of goods and services for consumption, but also in labor and in the construction of political subjects. The person is presumed to be an active agent wishing to exercise informed, autonomous, and secular responsibility in relation to his or her own destiny. The language of autonomy, identity, self-realization, and the search for fulfillment forms a grid of regulatory ideals, not making up an amorphous cultural space, but traversing the doctor's consulting room, the factory floor, and the personnel manager officer, and organizing such diverse programs as those for the training of unemployed youth and those for the electoral competition of political parties. A critical analysis of these new ethical vocabularies under governmental inscription might examine the ways in which they establish new new dividing practices within and between subjects. Thus, the language of responsible self-advancement is linked to a new perception of those outside civility, the excluded of or marginalized, willfulness, incapacity, or ignorance cannot or will not exercise such responsibility. On the one hand, pathologies are re-individualized, removed from a social determination into a moral order, thus providing the basis for new and harsher strategies of surveillance and control of those who, after all, bear the responsibility for their fate within their own hands. Exemplary is the way in which, in the UK, the unemployed person has become a job seeker and the homeless person a rough sleeper. On the other hand, these new sectors of the population are opening up to new forms of intervention by experts, which will re-educate or empower them, equipping them with the techniques of life planning and personal conduct to cope as autonomous subjects, deploying psychological techniques from social skills training to group relations. Further, it is important to draw attention to the emergence of new modalities for folding authority into the soul associated, in particular, with the psi forms of expertise. The diverse techniques of the psychosciences, those of assessment, classification, and discipline, those which produce a knowledge of social dispositions, those which deal with motivations, attitudes, and desires, generate a multiplicity of techniques of reformatory intervention upon person and groups. As I have already argued, the psi disciplines provide an array of techniques for the practical government of conduct in local sites, providing professionals of human conduct with a way of exercising their authority in keeping with, and not in opposition to, the valorization of autonomous subjectivity, in suggesting ways in which those who have authority can exercise in it relations to a knowledge of the inner nature of those subjects to authority. Psi accords authority a novel ethical justification as a kind of therapeutic activity. Further, a whole new array of authorities of subjectivity have taken shape in the form of broadcast images of dilemmas for the self-conduct and self-formation, no longer in the realm of romance or adventure, but in quotidian narrative of everyday life. This public habitat of images and stories supposes certain repertories of personhood as the a priori of the forms of like they display. It is amplified by a relation with the technologies of marketing and the shaping of consumption. These consumption technologies, themselves informed by the theories and techniques of the psi science, propagate images of conduct in terms of new relations between the purchase of goods and services and the shaping of the self. New modes, techniques, and images of self-formation and self-problematization are disseminated, specialized in new ways according to market segments and lifestyle choices, and operating according to the objectives of profit and or pleasure, rather than national well-being. They presuppose a certain kind of freedom in those whose subjectivity they engage. Freedom here as the desire by each individual to conduct his or her existence as a project for the maximization of quality of life. And in a kind of reverse move, the technologies of subjectification through adversity and marketing become the basis of a whole new regime of the government of conduct in relation to health, education, and security. These two will be enjoined by both public bodies such as health promotion agencies and private organizations such as those selling health insurance, not as a matter of morality or public duty, but in the service of the prudent running of the enterprise of one's life and the maximization of its quality. Finally, one can point to the consonance of the changes that I have noted in the revised problematizations of political rule that can be termed advanced liberal programs of rule seek to dismantle the apparatus of welfare and install novel governmental technologies, extending the nationalities of contrast, consumers, and competition to domains where social logics previously reigned, breaking up bureaucracies and governing professionals at a distance. through budgets, audits, codes, market demands, making individuals themselves interested in their own government. Rose 1994. Advanced liberal programs of rule presuppose the activity of subjects and seek to act upon that activity to establish a consonance between the self-promoting endeavors of those who are to be the subjects of rule and the objectives of those who are to exercise rule. Such transformations have been much criticized, especially from the left. However, perhaps the ascendancy of these new technologies of rule and the ways in which they have been taken up is in so many different national political contexts by political forces of many different complexions indicates that they have versatility and a potency not recognized by their critics. This potency lies in part, at least, in their relentless inventiveness, their ability to find formulas for rule that will allow subjects to come to recognize themselves in the practices that govern them. If we are to gain a critical purchase upon these contemporary strategies for the conduct of conduct, it will be in part through historical investigations which can unsettle and devalorize the regime of subjectification to which they are inextricably linked.